Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of 4400. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with Claudette's side of things. Obviously, she's kind of redecorated and kind of brought a little more life to Jarrell's brother's place. And obviously Jarrell was just making excuses of like, oh, he just came to stop by. He's like, oh, I just happened to be in the neighborhood. You're like, no, at first I was wondering is he just using this as an excuse to check on one of like 4400 stuff, but it's like, oh no, like he was just making an excuse to come see her. And you could tell like they're both feeling something there. But Jarrell actually hooked her up for her own job because for her, she's already prepared for like the money and stuff like that for the 4400, like their own expenses and stuff like that. She figured it was only a matter of time before like all that kind of got swept underneath them. So she already prepared for the future. So she wants a job, and he hooks her up, working at a bar. But one of the employees, Barney, one of the bartenders, like has serious beef with her. Like he was very dismissive of her initially, but then like he just kind of ignored her. It's like, yeah, whatever. It's kind of blah blah blah. But then like he found out from like guards at the who were at the hotel that she's she's one of the 4400, and then like he just super like looking at down on her as like something else, because people, just not just him, but a lot of people starting to believe them to be something other than human, which I think Claudette's already had to deal with that. She already had to deal with that in the past, like the time she's from, in many different regards. One is just like the way people are treated, because she took her photography, because she's even present day made a dark room to bring out to develop photos, but she used to do it back in the day as well. She photographed a lot of the terrible things that were being done to black folk, but it was a conversation about sit-ins, versus taking more drastic actions. Your Martin Luther King Jr. approach of nonviolence versus Malcolm X, the whole perspective, which is kind of like the only way to kind of get the equality is kind of being by forceful hand, is kind of fight back, that those clashing ideologies back then. And so she was put in that position where one of her friends, Barbara, was about like, no, we need to actually strike back. Like, especially if you use your photos, Claudette, then that'll rise people up. But she was almost telling her friend Barbara, stop talking about it. Because I guess it's like, it's not public knowledge that Claudette's the one who took the pictures, because her husband Jimmy, like, he's the one leading the group, and now he's following more so Malcolm's approach of like non-violence, which is super hypocritical, because he's talking about like, oh, we need to like follow in the gods, what the Bible says. So it's basically you get struck, turn the other cheek, paraphrasing. So I think that's so interesting, and so once again hypocritical, because he's so like that, but he's so aggressive about because it's so interesting about you're trying to get freedom for your people while also silencing your wife. I think that's the hypocrisy of it, but it's also like, it's the time she came from, where it's like, being black, you were put in your place for being black, you were put in your place for being a woman, you were put in your place for being a black woman. So that I just thought was kind of like the complicated, like I said, hypocrisy of it all. That she actually was fed up because she kept staring at the photos, and she suggested to Jimmy, like, maybe we should actually take a course, like some actual physical action, but he didn't want to listen to it. And he was just kind of like, no, woman, you're going to listen to what I have to say. But she actually spoke up, and other people believe, like, it's like, right, they hurt us the way we do. So we go to the Grand Wizards of the KKK's place. We wait till no one's there, and we burn the house down. We make sure no one gets hurt, but we also make it clear, like, we won't just sit idly by, because we just sit there, we're just gonna be sitting there waiting to get killed. But Jimmy kind of like shuts her down, and shuts like that down, even to the point later on he calls like a medical group to like take her in, because it's like, right, I'm going to send you to a facility where women like you who kind of speak out of term, they'll fix you. I'm like, Jesus. I also thought it was interesting, it's like there were white people that, like, I guess, like, if you're labeled as crazy, it doesn't matter in that time. Like, oh, probably quicker to lock her up if they hear, like, oh, not only is she a crazy one, she's a crazy black woman, so that's probably going to be even quicker to, like, it's just like, but it's like, yeah, I think that's so interesting. Like, you're trying to fight the institution your way, and you kind of institutionalize or attempting to institutionalize your wife. Even to the point Claudette's like, I'm sorry, I spoke out of turn. It was a mistake. Like, please don't do this. He's like, you made me do this. Even the fact, the way he touches her face, like the way he grabs her face, like, you're going to listen to me, a woman. He's like, we see that he's verbally abusive. Like, I mean, the way he puts his hands on her, the way he grabs her, he's physical as well. But it's just like, he treats her like, nah, you're supposed to be seen, not heard. Like I said, because I don't even think he ever gave her credit for the photos. It wasn't meant to be. It's just kind of like, oh, he probably announced, it's like, oh, someone I know got me these photos. He never gave Claudette, like, no, she's the one having to watch these horrors firsthand and is able to take these pictures so that we know what's going on. He will use the pictures because he's like, right, I'm the one that's going to lead us, not you, woman. It's kind of that mentality. But present day, like, you know, because Miss Grover got her clippings to show that Barbara, her friend, actually, you know, she passed away, over a decade ago at this point in time, because I think she passed away in 2005, but she was someone that was on, like she joined, like, the Black Panthers. She led the revolution. She was a powerful voice. You know, Ms. Grover was saying, like, from the time you had where you at, where it's like, women didn't have voices, now we do, you know? So, she helps out, you know, she no longer chooses to be silenced by someone like Barney, because, you know, it's not even just like a white thing. It's just, you know, she came from a time where men silenced women in general. Her own husband tried to silence her, so she wasn't going to be silenced by Barney looking down upon her. So she, with some of the other 4400s, basically ended up getting him fired for the bigot that he is, like choosing not to serve them and looking at them as less than human. And it all worked out. And obviously everything between her and Jarrell was really cute. Because I think in the grand scheme of things, she's not... Because I was wondering, like, how this would all play out, considered she is married, but it's also like, right, it's been decades, obviously. She's, like, decades into the future, but also it's like, I'm assuming her husband's long since been dead, potentially, but also, like, he wasn't a good man in her eyes, especially, well, not just in her eyes, in our eyes as well. Like, he wasn't a good guy the way he treated her. So, you know, someone who's actually helping you, you know, and meaning him like, nah, I didn't do this, Claudette, you did it on your own, recognizing, like, he's not taking credit for your accomplishments either. So it's like, no, you did this because you are a strong, independent woman. But he's like, oh, I could walk you home. I mean, not like that, because I know you're strong, but they start kissing, which I'm like, everybody hooking up this episode in particular. But what I thought was so fascinating is what we got at the end, because it looks like Claudette straight up building a bomb, which are like, well, to be fair, from the time that she was from, she is someone who she definitely leaned more towards a Malcolm X of, like, you kind of have to strike to kind of be heard and known. Like, now she's not trying to kill anybody, but turning to violence when necessary. Now, I think that's so interesting because they already set it up last episode with Mildred, at least from Hayden's vision, that Mildred is definitely going down the more extremist route, and I guess Claudette potentially is going to be set up in that. So it is going to be an even bigger divide going forward amongst the 4400, because it's going to be those who are going to try a non-violent approach. It's going to be, and I think that's the parallel. Parallel is going to be made like a Malcolm versus Martin Luther King Jr. versus Malcolm X perspective. I mean, I'd already made the comparison with the X-Men, and the X-Men is just a parable to that, you know, racism, but also like Professor X is the Malcolm in this situation. I mean, the Martin in this situation, Dr. King, and Magneto is the Malcolm X perspective in it. So I think that's kind of where it is. Now, who's going to lead the charge of each respective, like, front? I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see, like, on the more, like, non-violent side of things, who's going to lead the charge versus who's going to lead the charge in a violent. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting on that front, but I wasn't expecting them to kind of do that. But it's like, oh, it's interesting that they set up Claudette's story of, like, she said, like, you know, like, even back then she was willing to go this far, like, you know, and that's the thing of, like, I would, you know, it's easy to preach nonviolence, you know, but for some people, like, when you're beaten down so hard, we've seen such horrific things, it's you got to make it, you got to hit back hard, is the perspective. So it's like, you know, once again, she has the intention of no one getting hurt, but that's not always going to be copacetic. So we'll definitely see how that plays out, but I think that's what they're potentially setting Claudette's story up to be. I don't think Jarrell would be too okay with that, so that might lead to some conflicts between where they both align on that personally. But that's definitely going to be an interesting element to keep an eye out for going forward. But another element to this episode is Andre. Andre was starting to feel sick the entire episode. I was like, oh. And that guard's laughing like, oh, aren't you a Dr. Huh? And then Andre touched him and the guy's arm broke immediately. I was like, wait, what? I was like, whoa. I was like, yo! I was like, that's crazy. I was like, wow. Because initially they set it up last episode to be like, okay, he has like a healing ability of some sort, but he can heal other people. But the interesting and dual side to his ability is that his power is actually a transfer of pain. And it's not just like the feeling of pain, like, because it's interesting how it manifests itself in him. It manifests as just a literal, like, him feeling sick, but whatever wound he healed, he can transfer, which is, interesting in many different regards, because I think you can come at it from the perspective of his power being applied from the fact is that he is a healer, he is a doctor, but there is also the science, like, experimental side of things, so it almost plays in that regard too, that's how his power works. Like, there is there's some natural balance in some sort of why their powers are what they are, because we do have someone who can take all those wounds, Claudette, and heal from them. So because they showcased that when because he ended up showcasing it to he explained his powers to Shanice, and then they both showed it to kind of Claudette, and they actually ended up helping her with the whole Barney situation. But obviously him and Shanice have a lot to figure out, because he ends up talking to her about, like, because she's like, oh, because he ended up apologizing for getting Mariah involved, and he's like, right, I wasn't thinking. She's like, right, I'm glad, that's all I wanted. I wanted an apology without a but, because a but would end up, like, because you'll be by saying, like, but, you'll be making excuses, you're negating all the apology, so him not including that was good. But she's also like, is that the only reason why you've been avoiding me? And it's like, right, it's because of me saying Logan's name in my sleep. She's like, yeah, I can't, she tries to apologize for, like, her subconscious. He's like, no, I don't care. She's like, oh, you don't care? But I do care. He's like, no, it's not that I don't care, it's just like, I do care, I just don't care. And she's like, what are you saying? For him, it's like, he wants to be nonchalant about it. He's like, we live in an era where people are friends with their exes, people date multiple lovers. It's just, but for him, it's like a thing of, he wants to make it seem like he's okay, because he doesn't want to seem too clingy in some regards, because he doesn't want to scare her off, is what that is. But he's like, yeah, I don't want, like, I don't want Logan to be in your mind. I don't want to have to occupy even your subconscious with him. I want to be with you. And, because he's like, so at the end of the day, I do care. And she's like, I care too. And they do their thing, which you also have Keisha this episode dealing with relationship issues with Jessica, because she's trying to get more information from Jessica on a date. But it's also the thing of, like, because we find out, like, oh, like, the 4400, their blood work, something came back that was inconsistent with their blood work, which Keisha's like, wait, you didn't ever say anything. She's like, one, we barely see each other. Two, the fact is that, why would I tell you it's classified? But, like, Keisha's just worried about the 4400, because even Jarrell jokes about it. It's like, oh, you're softening up on the 4400 and getting hard on the bosses? Like, what? Oh, like, what happened to you? You used to be, like, joking and stuff, but sadly, this shift in things has changed things, because it's like, right, Jessica's like, I'm drowning in so many other ways, and I thought at the very least I would have your support and you'd be by my side, but apparently not. And then kind of realizing that Keisha isn't even going to fight for it. It's like, oh, we're having a fight right now, and you're not even going to fight for me. She's like, I'm done, and walks away. And so I guess it puts things in perspective for Keisha, that it's just like, right, our relationship was only, well, because I don't know. Because the problem is, from the way Keisha interpreted it, it's like, right, I got dumped, not because I cheated or anything, it's because I'm a cold bitch. Which Soraya, like, Soraya's smooth as hell, like, sliding in that moment. It's like, oh, really, your girlfriend dumped you? Oh, wow. Even though, like, we've known since the beginning she's had a thing for Keisha, and it's like, oh, like, did you cheat? And she's like, no. And it's funny that she's like, well, cheater's gonna cheat. Cold bitch, you just gotta wait for the right person to come around and melt for it. And you're like, yo, look at you, Soraya. Kind of a little messed up that you're sliding in at this moment. Granted, that's probably going to become an issue if Jessica finds out, because it's like, we literally just broke up, and you getting fresh with someone else. I don't know why I used the term fresh. How 2021 of me to use the term fresh. I mean that sarcastically because, because that's such an antiquated word to say, like, oh, you get... Because I didn't even use it in the right context of, like, saying fresh. It's, oh, God. Regardless, I just thought that was so fascinating. Which Soraya's helping LaDonna this episode, too. Even though it's kind of like, yeah, because LaDonna's like, yeah, I need your help building a computer that no one knows that I'm having access to. But Soraya was kind of reluctant because she's like, you're not going to... If you screw me over, you're dead to me again. And then LaDonna's like, oh, LaDonna. And it's like... Okay, but she's like, right, you did have me at, let's build a computer, which she's like, oh no, I'm that kind of geek, aren't I? Which is super cute. But Soraya did make it really clear, circling back to the whole her and Keisha thing, I'm not a rebound type of girl. Like, if we going in, we going all the way in. And then she's like, or we could just talk about it tomorrow. I'm like, yo, she even set up, like, the fire on the computer. She's like, oh, I'm smart and romantic, aren't I? I'm like, yo, she got it all planned out. But circling back to the LaDonna situation, LaDonna's trying to build a computer so that she could decrypt the files they got from Nipsey Med and try and find out, like, what they really got on the 4400. And so she actually talks to Soraya about, like, well, her complicated relationship with her mom, but also her dad. She says that her dad got penalized as, like, this monster because her mom would blast him on the TV show. But she's like, no, he was the only one that ever really understood me. She's like, I was actually kind of a daddy's girl until my parents split. And so she got to see less and less of him. She even tried calling him, but she hasn't been able to reach him. It's interesting because her mom is blowing up her phone, but she can't get in contact with her dad. But, LaDonna's trying to figure out what she's going to do because she's thinking, like, oh, I'm going to go hang with my friends from the TV show, the reality show, which Soraya's like, really? It's like, no, they're not as bad as you think they are. But Soraya's trying to compare, like, what about the 4400 here? They're your friends. She's like, oh, we didn't really know each other. But she's like, yeah, but, there is such thing as bonding through trauma. And she's like, no, I'm too awesome to be going through trauma or something of that nature. But, she never really took time to think, like, because, like, Soraya's like, oh, are you going to say goodbye to anyone? And she's like, no, I don't really have anyone, like, I'm really close, like, true friends with. But when Claudette was like, oh, you want to, like, girls' night and stuff like that? And she's like, you know what? I'm going to be there with you and girls' night, and I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to say goodbye. And Claudette's like, oh, okay. Are you sure you're okay? She's like, yeah, I am. But it all changed when her dad called. We don't know what went down in that call, but it made LaDonna decide that she was going to leave, and she left a video for Andre, like, yeah, I know you're not really good at this, but she's like, I didn't want to say goodbye because, like, in person, because she's like, it would have actually been too hard, because legitimately, despite everything, she has made friends here, and because this place has also presented an opportunity for her to, like, just be the truest version of herself, that not being the version that she has to depict to the world as well as to the, to the TV shows and stuff. So I'm curious to see what the circumstances are that fully made her decide to leave. But her goodbye to Andre was actually really sweet. And she's like, I'm going to have these, like, those pictures he took from Yipsy Med, like, when he was supposed to be getting the video and stuff like that. She's like, oh, I like that. This is a good one. And, like, even see Andre kind of sad, to say goodbye to LaDonna. But she left him all the ways to help, like, it's like, right, I'm going to take things slow and help you find your way through these files. And if at any point in time you need help, go to Soraya. She's on our side. So I thought that was really, sweet in that regard. But other than that, we also have the 4400 signing these contracts, and Shanice is actually looking through them, as the lawyer to kind of figure things out. Jarrell is talking to one of the 4400, Jiun, and trying to find out, like, what's going on, because she tried to get some background information that should be admitted to her, but she couldn't get it. And then all of a sudden a Rev comes over and is like, oh, is he bothering you? I'm like, yo, like, back the hell up, like, where you up? And it's like, yeah, he's definitely sliding more into this, like, slimy side of things, because even Jarrell, like, because later on, Shanice ended up looking through the contracts. Basically, the 4400 will be giving up their rights. Basically, it would be putting them in essentially a conservativeship, which obviously I think that word is actually kind of, like, I don't know, like, it's always been a thing, but I feel like we've never really had it, like, that word be as big as it is because of more recent events, the whole situation with Britney Spears. I feel like that has kind of put that word in a lot more of a general zeitgeist. Not saying that it shows like that influenced it, but it's just like conservatorships were always a thing, but I never really knew the ins and outs of them and just how powerful they can be until you look at the Britney Spears situation, and it just kind of puts things in perspective for you. But it's like, yeah, the 4,400 would lose a lot of their rights, but it's like, why would the Rev be signing them up for it? Like last episode, him walking away with Mr. Green, that's why I was like, you don't think he's the one that's selling out the 4,400, but like, why would he? Like, well, we don't know if he has any powers. I think that's going to be the point. I think it's going to be that he's going to probably be one of the only 4,400 that doesn't have a power, but his power is just going to be his power of persuasion. Not unless it ends up being like a thing of like he's a Nathan from Misfits. If you've never seen Misfits, spoilers, Nathan was a late bloomer. I won't spoil what his power was, but you don't find out what it is until like the very end of series 1 what his power actually is. So it's kind of something of that nature where I'm wondering, like, is he just going to be a late bloomer with his powers, or is it going to be a situation of he's not? I think it'd be more impactful if he ends up not having abilities, because him manipulating those with abilities would just make him seem even scummier. Like, oh yeah, like I'm using you and manipulating you because you have what I don't have. So maybe he's even helping because it's like, right, I help you with the 4,400, get you more control of them. Because like I brought up, I would assume one of the reasons why they're doing what they're doing is because they're trying to... I would assume they're trying to replicate abilities. Find out why the 4,400 have the very specific abilities they have, and can it be replicated? You know, could those powers be passed on to someone else? That's why I'm wondering, could Rev be getting that slice of the deal of like, okay, you figure this all out, I give you the 4,400, you give me powers in the process? I don't know. I mean, it could just be like, either way, he's definitely putting himself in a position of power, having control and sway over so many people. So a lot of people, the only person who ever saw him for what he really was Claudette. And even she backed down a little bit, but it's like, no, you had every right to kind of be suspicious. So now they have to figure out how many of the 4,400 have signed a contract. What is the Rev getting out of working with Mr. Green? A lot of interesting questions on that front. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.